Rolling. All right. So yesterday we did finish up talking about the signing of the Constitution along with the political parties and what they thought needed to go in, right? How this was going to be assembled, right? Real quick, with the signing of the Constitution, was there a Bill of Rights yet? No, there was not. No, there was not. Good, good. All right. So as you can see here with this slide, we did talk about the two sides, the Federalists, the Anti-Federalists, what they wanted, what they thought was essential, right? What they needed within the Constitution. The biggest thing here for the Anti-Federalists, the Democratic Republicans, or the Confederationists, right? They wanted to make sure that they had a Bill of Rights. The Federalists, they wanted a strong central government, okay, which what they got. And the Federalist Papers really gets just kind of entitled, really talked about that, discussed it, to make sure that the central government had a little bit more power, right, than the states. Okay, right. We'll talk about it next chapter with federalism, right? When it comes to federalism, there's a balance between state, local, and national levels, right? Each of them have different set of powers. And we'll mention about how maybe there's even shared powers amongst the states and the national government. So it is important, right, to make sure that we have these checks and balances, that we have not one branch becoming too strong or one political party or, I don't know, national government having too much power over the states. So there has to be a fine balance. And our founding fathers did a really, really good job, let's face it, right? Way back in the day here of establishing a government, a constitution that's for the people, and that won't just be forgotten about. And that still holds strong, holds true still to this day. All right, so we talked about the signing. Real quick, here's the structure, which I do have the assignment. I'll put it out towards the end of class here today. I'll have it due Friday, so tomorrow I'll work on that. All right, and I'll mention about the other assignment about analyzing amendments here as well. All right, real quick, there's the articles of the Constitution. Again, at the very top, the preamble, the introduction. We mentioned about the goals of it. All right, the biggest thing here is knowing that the first, second, third, right? These are the branches of government. Again, legislative branch was talked about first, which again, the founding fathers thought the legislative branch, if anything, should hold the most power, right? I know they have checks and balances over each other, but if you had to put it down to it, yeah, the legislative branch has the most power as these are representatives from each state. All right, executive branch, that's the presidency and the vice presidency. And we mentioned about some of the powers yesterday with the checks and balances of what they have, right? And the importance of the executive branch, right? Judicial branch, your Supreme Court, right? I know this was the last one, but they also have a very, very strong power with judicial review. Remember the principle of the Constitution? All right, so with judicial review, this is again deeming laws, policies, executive orders as constitutional or not. So they kind of got the final check, right? Relations amongst the states, we mentioned about how early on in the United States history, there's a lot of issues, all right, with the Articles of Confederation, trade issues, tariffs, how these states were acting like their own countries in a way. And we needed them to come together. So that's something important. Again, one of the big struggles early on. Right, amending the Constitution, which we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and the ratification process we already mentioned, right? Supremacy clause, just knowing that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. All right, so now it's just a quick review. I didn't really want to give you a bell ringer here today. Okay, just kind of going over what we talked about yesterday. Again, the signing, talked about it. Talked about the debate, what should be in this in the Constitution for the ratification process. Biggest thing here again talked about was the Bill of Rights. All right. So here we go. Amending, changing the Constitution. Like we mentioned, this is a working document, right? It's still alive, right? So to speak. It's not just something that was relevant way in the past, which with today's activity that you'll work more on tomorrow and Friday. Okay. Some of the amendments we can look at and say, huh, right? Yeah, maybe we realized back in the day why this was needed. Maybe it's not as relevant as we think. Okay. Maybe today it's not as relevant. So you can analyze them, you can look at them and kind of rank them based off of, relevance. So I'll explain that assignment here soon. All right, proposing an amendment. So how does it work when it comes to proposing amendment, bringing it up? So 2/3 of both houses, Congress here, so the House and the Senate, right? So that's a way that this could get brought up, right? Bringing up the attention of this amendment. 2/3 of all state legislatures have to hold a special session or convention. Right. So typically when you see it, yeah, you see the House and the Senate bring up these amendments, and then it gets voted on, ratified through the process down here at the bottom. Right. But that's how amendment gets proposed. Again, the Bill of Rights went through a little bit different. Right. Obviously, this was established shortly after the Constitution. So they just kind of went through a little bit differently. But since then, this ratification process, again, it takes some time, right? Is it hard to get a lot of these political parties to agree on things? Yeah, big time, right? So you can see why we only have 27 amendments, right? Ratifying. So 3/4 of the state legislatures must vote to approve the amendment. Okay. Or conventions in 3/4 of the states approve the amendment. So in other words, right, 2/3 brings it up, 3/4 have to ratify it. So yeah, this process takes a little bit of time. You got to get people on your side, and it might be really difficult to do that, right? There has to be a lot of lobbying into place, right? I know towards the end of President Biden's presidency, it was a little strange. He was bringing up about how the 28th Amendment, when it comes to equality amongst genders, it just it was a little odd for him to bring it up because it didn't bring forth this process. It's like, hey, the president doesn't have this power, but it just seems strange. So, in any case, this is like the last time talked about a 28th Amendment, and it was just kind of odd the way it was brought up. But that was just recently, obviously. Um, anyway, real quick, here's a figure explaining it. So, how this could work. So, again, proposing 2/3 of the National Convention, and then ratification process, 3/4, right, of the state legislatures, and 3/4 of state conventions. So again, this is kind of how this works. This process goes down. All right. Here's another figure to explain it. All right. Is there any questions? So very basic, very simple, right? How this procedure occurs, but it does take a lot of time. Again, you need a lot of people on your side here, even people across the aisle, right, of political parties. We know that they don't get along too well. Anybody watch the special session yesterday? Caden, you watched it? Good. What do you get out of it? Not really much. I mean, there's a lot of talking, I guess.
Yeah, I like him. The guy got escorted out.
Oh, I was right in the beginning. He was waving his cane. It's like, what are you doing, dude? Act like an adult, huh? All right. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was kind of strange that part. And you could just see kind of the tension too between the two political parties, which is kind of sad, right? The President of the United States, I know, is not favored by the opposite end, the Democrats, right? But at the same time, there are a lot of issues, a lot of things that were brought up that as Americans, I think we all can agree on. And we didn't see any applause. We didn't see any standing up, which kind of sad. And obviously, vice versa, right? When you think about some of the other events that were brought up or topics, it's like, okay, we could see the tension and the conflict maybe between the two political parties over certain matters. Yeah. What else do you think?
That mostly the left side was staying up and applauding the right side. I mean, the right side could have stand up and applauded for some of the stuff that happened. But
Yeah. 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 It was like one of the biggest things. Yeah. Good. Katie, do you watch it? Oh, I thought you were turning around. Okay. I thought you. All right. Olivia? No? Yari? Dude. All right. I get it. It was pretty late, actually. It was the longest special session that we saw ever, right? And again, that's one of the president's powers. It actually worked out perfect. We went over the checks and balances assignment, right? He can call those special sessions whenever, right? It was it felt like a State of the Union address, right? Usually you have those kind of deep in the term of the president, but to have it so early in his presidency, first 100 days, pretty wild. But there has been a lot that's been done, right? A lot has been going on where maybe it's important to have one of these special sessions. All right, good. So real quick, guys, here's your assignment. I published it not too long ago. What you're going to do is select an issue you believe the Constitution needs to address and propose an amendment. use existing amendments as guides for form of language. So I know a lot of the amendments have like kind of fancy wording, right? They're formatted pretty in proper English, right? It's not just like, okay, here's a few words or they're spelled out like you would spell a text message. Don't do that, right? Don't do that. All right, what I want you to do, here are the guidelines. Explain what your proposed amendment will do. Explain why you believe it is needed and how the nation will benefit if it is ratified. Indicate what opposition you might expect there to be for your amendment and why. Suggest arguments that could be used to reply to the criticism of the amendment. I'm going to have this due tomorrow because I know it might take some time for you guys. So I'm going to publish it. I'll put it out now. I'd like you to work on it. If you get it done today, great. But if it takes you to tomorrow, no problem. Right? Real quick, as we're talking, here's that assignment now that I'd like you to work on. Here's the structure of the U.S. Constitution. It looks like a lot, but it's really not. All right. You can use your textbook, which you can access through modules. The chapter page at the top can help you find, obviously where to find that in the textbook. All I want you to do is just fill this out. It's a good structure of it. It tells you kind of the flow of the Constitution. And here's the preamble introduction. Just want you to list the goals, right? The articles, which we already talked about. So the presentation you can use too to help you, whatever you want to do. All right. The amendments, there you have it. Okay. And here's some of the requirements when it comes to, congressman being a federal judge. There you have it. Amendments, there you go. And then here's number 7. You just answer the questions based off of the articles of the Constitution. It's pretty straightforward. Again, I'm going to put this out tomorrow. You have tomorrow and Friday to work on it. And then the final one, oh my gosh, it's never ending. Olivia, you getting annoyed? No? All right, good. Usually they're like, oh, Mr. Bowman, all these assignments. All right, here's the last one. It's called Analyzing the Amendments. All right, once this loads, there we go. So what I want you to do is just create a presentation that really goes over these key points, right? So discuss and choose 7 amendments that your group has been saying non-essential. So there's a few amendments that you might think are maybe not relevant anymore. So typically everybody says, hey, the 18th Amendment, they literally like crossed it out, right? They overturned it with the 21st Amendment. So a lot of people just say, hey, this is not essential, right? The fact that we bring this one up, even though it's crossed out when you look at it in many documents, all right, obviously that's one. A lot of people bring up the 3rd Amendment, right, when it comes to quartering, right? Obviously the Quartering Act was a big thing that ticked off a lot of colonists back in the day. But today it's kind of implied. It's like, all right, we don't have to quarter soldiers in our homes. Okay. So that's a good example. B, discuss and choose the next 10 amendments that you think are solid, but maybe not essential. So maybe you think the amendment is good, but it's like, okay, the importance of it, maybe it's not so important, right? Just make sure you can explain it though, right? You can present it with your group, right? And say, hey, right, this is what I think is a solid amendment, but maybe I don't think it's essential because of so-and-so, right? And list your points. All right, and finally, choose 10 amendments that you think are most important. And then I'd like you to rank them in this importance. Right. Again, a lot of people choose the First Amendment. Obviously, freedom of speech, very important, right? A lot of people even say the Second Amendment when it comes to right to bear arms, right? So obviously that's important too. Anyway, that's what I want you to do. You can work in a group. So if you want to work with a partner or if you want to work by yourself, that's fine. But I just want you to break down these amendments, okay, that you can present them to us. The biggest reason for it is that, well, you can study for your test next week on the Constitution. All right, here's an example. All right, so you can kind of go through it here. So as he was listing these here that he thinks are not essential, right? Obviously, he has a little bit of a description of what the amendment is, and then he had another sheet of paper, right? A reference point where he said, hey, I think the 3rd Amendment is not essential. Why? Because and then he explains it, right? So don't just say, here's the list, done. No, you got to explain it. It shows you, right, that you know the amendment, right? That you understand it. That's the whole point of it. All right, does that make sense? Okay, and then he kind of goes through. There it is. Perfect. Boom. All right, I linked this to the assignment. All right, so you guys can use that as a reference. All right, real quick. So as you guys are working on the proposing amendment, I'm gonna bring up a few that were brought up that were proposed. I think you guys will like it. All right, so you can just listen. Listen to these here. All right, so in 1876, an attempt to abolish the United States Senate. Is that crazy? Is that wild? All right, that was literally one of the amendments that were proposed. All right, 1876, the forbidding of religious leaders from occupying a governmental office or receiving federal funding. Separation of church and state to the extreme here, I guess, huh? All right, 1878, an executive council of 3 to replace the office of president. Whoa. Kind of wild. Olivia doesn't like that one, huh? All right. 1893. Renaming the nation the United States of the Earth. I don't know about that one. 1893. Abolishing the United States Army and Navy. What? Whoa. I wonder what the reasoning were behind some of these. I don't know. Yeah, right. Yeah. 1894, acknowledging that the Constitution recognized God and Jesus Christ as the supreme authorities in human affairs. Okay. 1912. All right. These were proposed. Okay. Think of the timing. Some of these sound okay. Making marriage between races illegal. Pretty strange there. All right. 1914. Finding divorce to be illegal. 1916, all acts of war should be put to a national vote. Anyone voting yes had to register as a volunteer for service in the United States Army. You don't mind that one? Okay. You go fight it, right? Okay. 1933, an attempt to limit personal wealth to $1 million. I hear a lot of people actually saying that even still today.
It's because like, I mean, Elon Musk has so much wealth. It's
It's like you can live off $1 million, right? And then all the other money goes to somewhere else.
South Korea does this. Like all their pop stars, they have caps on how much they can earn.
Yeah.
They're still like wealthy, but
Yeah.
all their money that they get past that cap gets put into like the government for like charities.
I got you. I see that morally being a good thing, but at the same time, if you know you're going to get capped at a certain amount, why would you? Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, but if you get capped at a certain amount, let's say whatever it is that gonna is that gonna really motivate someone else to create the next business or the next innovation, the next product, the next good, the next service? No, it's not. Right. So I see what you're saying, but there is a kickback to it. Right. So with Elon Musk, he owns a lot of businesses that provide a lot of benefit to people. It's like, well, would he do that if he didn't have that extra capital? Probably not. Right. He couldn't. All right. Yeah. So anyway, 1936, an attempt to allow the American people to vote on whether or not the United States should go to war. Oh, okay. 1938, the forbidding of drunkenness in the United States and all of its territories. Huh. Prohibition right around that time, huh? 1947, the income tax maximum for an individual should not exceed 25%. 1948, the right of citizens to segregate themselves from others. What? Jeez. 1971, American citizens should not, or sorry, American citizens should have the inalienable right to an environment free of pollution. All right. I don't know. Wow. All right, so those are some interesting ones that I found. Anyway, over 11,000 proposed. The 27th Amendment, when it comes to the salaries of congressmen, that was brought up over 200 years ago. So close to the start of our country. And now, all right, in the 1990s, that was proposed. So it was over 200 years that one was kind of fluctuating around. And then it brought up in the 1990s and said, hey, what do you think? Right. When it comes to congressmen voting on their salaries, right? I think we should limit that, right? Or maybe have that to the next session then. And that got proposed in the 90s, and that was the 27th Amendment. Interesting, isn't it? All right, so I'll give you guys some time. And if you guys want to talk it over, right? If you have any ideas or want to bounce some ideas around, just let me know.